Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this live session. My name is Rafi. I'm a BT apprentice. I work in BT Radiance in our providership team. And I wanted to welcome everyone to this session. The theme today will be, how can we, as young people, climb the career ladder? So before I let Marcus introduce himself, just want to say a big thank you on our behalf to Generation Success for putting on this event and for you joining us today. It's going to be an interactive session, so we want to hear what you have to say as well. Marcus, thank you for your time, and please introduce yourself and what you do.
So I'm Marcus. I'm a bit older than some of you guys. what am I, 64 now. And my career has taken me from finance, where I started, through to real estate, then into tech, and then now, well, I suppose now-ish, education, tech, real estate, finance, and generally I'm a part of the TED team, and I quite like sharing great ideas and uncovering great ideas. And my goodness, wasn't it fantastic to see how we managed to get onto the planet Mars, and that was just fantastic to see that unrolling, and I'm so excited to see what comes out of that. So excited. So that's roughly what I do. I'm hugely inquisitive, love to see things going on, and I discovered about me that I get really bored terribly quickly, so I find it very hard to focus for any length of time on any one thing. Mm-hmm. But if I have 2 or 3 things on the go, then I can focus on that little bit, and then focus on that little bit, and focus on that little bit. And somehow that intensity of short-term focus is as good as, if not better than, some people who spend all their time focusing on one thing. But, you know, I like to be intense. So that's me.
I love it, yeah.
Does that make sense, Rafi? And I'm here in Wimbledon, Southwest London, in my home. Yeah. There you go.
Wow, no, that sounds great. And I have to say, Marcus, since I met you, I think you're definitely someone who you're wearing a few different hats. So that's a really, you have that broad perspective. And I wanted to start off with upskilling and learning. I think this was a topic that we discussed during these times. And to start off, I'd love to hear your thoughts. For young people today who are entering the workplace, are qualifications or is work experience more important? And in your career, in your journey, what's your perspective on this?
Well, I don't think people recruit you on the basis of the qualification. I think people recruit you on the basis of what you can do, and what value you can add to a team or to the organization. And one way, unless you interview everybody, a good proxy is to say, well, if they got a qualification, then, at least there's some sort of threshold. But I bet we all know some people who are amazingly well qualified and they're just idiots. And you also know some people who are just absolutely brilliant, but somehow couldn't get the qualification. Schools are full of people who are super clever, just can't pass those wretched exams. And you get other people who somehow just pass exams, but you think, how the hell did you do that? So yeah, the qualification is something which might get you through the first hurdle. But actually what you do with it is going to really be based upon what your capabilities are. So I don't know what qualifications footballers have got. And actually, it doesn't really matter, because if you're a brilliant footballer, then I'm going to get you because you're a great footballer. If you're a wonderful actor, then actually the qualification is less important than the basic of being an actor. If you're a great YouTuber, do I care about what qualification? Maybe I do care a little bit, but I don't think I've ever seen people sort of saying to YouTube, I want to set up a new channel, and hey, I've got a master's in digital compository. So I don't think it's a qualification on its own. I think the qualification gets you through the door, but equally, the qualification can damage you.
Mm.
So if you've got, a degree from a university which nobody's ever heard of, then the qualification standard could be against you.
Yeah.
Because people might say, well, why do you think that that's important? And so rather than look at the qualification, they're looking at the reasoning behind you decided that would be a good expression of you. So I think it's all about what you can do, how you can demonstrate what you can do, and how somebody thinks you can add value. And that's why you recruit people, after all. You recruit people so they can add value to your organization, either just by being a body there, or you fulfill an obligation. You've got to have so many tall people and so many short people and so many big people and so many little tiny people. But if it's not on that physical attribute qualification or, benchmark, then it's going to be what you can do. And I think the challenge is how can you let people know what you are able to bring to the organization? An awful lot of people I know are looking at the qualification a little bit and then looking at the personal statement and how that's been written, and actually looking at the CV, seeing what you've published yourself, seeing what Instagram is saying about you, what you put on Instagram, seeing what you're putting on YouTube, seeing what tweets you're producing. Have a look at your social media in its widest sense, not just you and what you've put, but what people are putting about you. And that builds a whole picture, and actually it adds a richness to the qualification. And a lot of young people don't realize that, and a lot of schools don't realize that, and a lot of universities don't realize that. But the real world is looking at people. And all the evidence one can gain about somebody. So, for example, with me, if somebody's pitching for my business, I will immediately look on LinkedIn and just see, well, what's been written about them, what's said about them, and I'll have a quick look before I even decide if I'm going to listen to them.
Yeah.
And I think that goes on today, and I think a lot of people do that. You must do that, Rafi.
I do, yeah. I mean, I'm always, I think when we look at someone's LinkedIn, I think it's like, in the first 2 seconds, you kind of get a good feel for what they're about. And you spoke about this challenge, Marcus, the challenge. A lot of our people in education, maybe they're great thinkers and they're really creative and they're really great, but they're not able to showcase that. And we discussed the Davos 21st century skills and some of the competencies like critical thinking and collaboration. How do you think our young people, when they're looking to jump on that career ladder, how can they, because if our education system is perhaps lacking those, providing us with those skills, how can we catch up and upskill ourselves?
Well, I suppose we just have to recognize that school doesn't give you everything. And so if you take the modern organization, it's the ability to learn quickly.
Yeah.
Things are moving so fast, we have to learn quickly. And we don't get taught how to learn quickly. We get taught how to learn sequentially. And there is a sequence. You need to go step by step by step by step by step by step. But actually, when you want to learn how to use Fortnite, you don't go sequentially. You just put yourself in there.
Yeah.
And so the ability to learn fast is terribly important. The ability to communicate with other people is really important. In school, a lot of cases, collaboration is called cheating. So we're encouraged not to. And in some schools, students aren't encouraged to ask questions of their teachers. How old are you? What did you want to be before you became a teacher? Were you any good at school? And so they don't get the chance of working out, is that a good question to ask? How do I deal with somebody who's none of your business? Or all that sort of stuff. So the social skills, schools are a little bit lacking on. And actually, I don't know, Rafi, if I've got a chance of, I've picked up the 21st century skills requirement out of the World Economic Forum. I don't know, shall I put it on the screen now? Is that
yeah, that would be perfect, yeah.
So look, these are the competencies. And so it's foundational literacy. I mean, you can pick all this stuff up just by looking at World Economic Forum, and it'll tell you there immediately, there's the foundational stuff, which is literacy, numeracy, science, and ICT, but also financial literacy and cultural literacy. In a lot of cases, that just isn't taught in school at all. So people come out of school not knowing about tax, not knowing anything about that stuff. And then you've got other competence, thinking fast and creativity, good communication and collaboration. I talked about that earlier. But the real thing is the character, being curious, taking the initiative, being persistent, being adaptable, leadership, and all this sort of stuff. And actually, I don't think I've seen a GCSE in innovation, a GCSE in being a nice person, But I don't think anybody wants to recruit a rotter, So when you're recruiting somebody, you don't want somebody who's a pain in the butt. You want somebody who's nice, who's a good team worker, who's not going to annoy everybody. And we don't have a GCSEs on that, so that can only come out from what people are saying about you on LinkedIn and what people are saying about you and the way you've produced stuff. So it's got to shine through. And I really dislike LinkedIn profiles or any LinkedIn profiles. I'm super intelligent, super smart, and dead creative. Because you go, well, yeah, let's have a look and see if you really are. On the other hand, if you just put, I'm a really bad communicator, I'm totally uncreative, I'm just dull. Actually, that might be quite a good reverse tactic, but I fear. Does that go anywhere close to what you were asking me, Rafi?
It definitely does, yeah. And what I want to explore now is, you're the CEO of Bryqanston Square, and I'd love to know what work are you doing in your organization that you're spearheading to ultimately get these gaps filled, which the Davos 21st Century program said that we need to, upskill on.
Well, it's a little bit strange. So my journey is a bit odd, and I mean, maybe I don't know if I should flush out a little bit about the journey. So
yeah.
So I discovered. So I came from a troubled childhood and troubled background, and I realised I was a bit of a disruptive kid at school. But actually, you're allowed to be disruptive as long as you do well at exams. And I just realized that's just ridiculous, isn't it? So I got myself, 13 half decent GCSEs and 6 A levels, and they're okay. And, decent university and all the rest of it. And that's not because I'm super smart. It's just because I realize if I don't, I'm going to get thrown out. And so you might as well do well, which doesn't mean you spend all your time just being boring. And then by accident, I joined a firm of accountant. I really wanted to build cars. I wanted to race cars. And I went off to borrow the money, and the bank manager, the local bank, sort of said, "Well, Marcus, how much do you want to borrow?" And I guess today's number, about 50 million quid. And the guy went, "Whoa." And he called in a friend of his who happened to be an accountant. And the guy said, "Well, your business plan's rubbish, but you should join us. Learn how to do it." And at that moment, I realized that, you just have to be you, and it's okay. And any sort of setback gives you a whole load of information. Everything which goes wrong tells you something about how not to do it. I remember, learning to ride a bicycle, and I was so scared about hitting the rock in the road that I hit the bloody rock. So I was so fixated on not doing it. And some people are scared of failure. And the trouble is, if you're scared of failing, you'll never learn. And certainly in my organization, what I don't want to recruit is somebody who's never, ever made a mistake, because I don't want to be the one where you're going to get your first mistake. I quite like that. You've got a whole load of mistakes. I don't want to drive a car I don't want to be a passenger in a fast car with somebody who's just passed their test, who's never had an accident. I want somebody who knows what it's like to have a car accident, because they know what not to do.
Sure.
So what do I do? So I found myself by accident. I say it's all accident. I was talking to about 1,000 head teachers at something called the Association of School and College Leaders Annual Conference. And basically what I said is that you guys are doing all the wrong things, because what you're doing is you're focusing on exams. And if you're not careful, what you have students in school being taught stuff. They don't know why they need to learn it, by a lot of teachers who don't know what you can do with it anyway. And at the end of a certain period of time, you're doing a test, an exam, basically to see what you can remember. And when you think about it, that's just really bonkers. And I thought, well, it's going to take too long to try and change the system. We've got actually, Rafi, is it worth just taking a moment out just to analyze education in the UK?
Yeah, let's do it.
So in the UK, we've got about 700,000 people who are engaged in the world of education.
Mhm.
You know, they are, and I don't mean the support staff. I mean, it's sort of teaching assistants through to teachers, through to assistant heads, to professors and all the rest of it in schools and universities.
Mhm.
And the vast majority in UK schools and UK state schools, the vast majority have done okay at school. There are not a huge number of school teachers who are permanently excluded from every school they've ever been to. So the vast majority of teachers have done okay. A few have done outstandingly well, and a few have done catastrophically badly. But the vast majority have done okay. And then equally, the vast majority have gone to an okay university and done okay at it.
Mhm.
And then the sad thing is that a heck of a lot of teachers in our schools have basically gone school, university, school.
Yeah.
And any commercial experience has been, you know, in summer jobs or stuff like that. And so a lot of them have got some experience of the rest of the world, but very gradually that experience fades into just a long memory. So we've got about 700,000 people involved in the world of education, and the world of education is basically to prepare young people for making their way in the world today.
Yeah.
But the world today in the UK has got about 65 million people. So 1% are involved in preparing everybody coming through state education to make their way in the rest of the world.
Gosh, yeah.
And that 1% are not representative of the rest of the world at all, because they've got this done okay, become a teacher. Now, the crazy thing about it is that you, Rafi, have you got a teaching qualification?
I have not, no, I mean, not yet. So,
okay, so you wouldn't be allowed to be a teacher in a UK state school because you don't have a teaching qualification. You could be a teaching assistant, but you couldn't be a teacher.
Sure.
The craziness of it is that you could be a teacher in a private school.
Really?
Yeah, because they don't need to follow that. and you think about it and you go, blimey. So Rafi, you could be running a course on innovation at Eton College, but you wouldn't be able to do it at Eton Comp. And you go, oh my goodness, what is all of that? Now, you know, there's stuff about unions and protectionism and safeguarding, blah, 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 blah. But fundamentally, it means that the average teacher, may not have much experience of the rest of the world.
Mm.
And when you collect them all together and you start putting tests and exams, is it any surprise that the tests and exams, if I go back to that competency thing, tests and exams just cover just a small amount of it.
Mm.
And actually, it's the ability to communicate, to learn fast, to be inquisitive, to take the initiative, to be persistent, to be adaptable, and to have good social skills, which is really what's important to make your way after school or after university.
Mm. Yeah.
And so, you know, that's my take on what's going on. So what do I do in Bryqanston Square? Well, we just take students, build them as a team, and take them off to meet really interesting people. Just 4 or 5 on the same day, from a wide variety of backgrounds, and that's sufficient to get kids going, good grief, I had no idea this was going on. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough that, just over 1,000 people have agreed that if I bring a dozen students to them for 1 hour, they're quite happy to spend that 1 hour. When I say I want to bring 30 students, they go, oh, no, that's a presentation. You know, I'm not prepared for that. And if it's 4 or 5 students, well, you might as well make it a dozen, because you get a dozen people around a board table, so have a dozen. And that goes from everybody. You know, I've had principal ballerinas through to you know, what you could call really serious musicians, through to music studios, through to technologists, to scientists, to mechanics, to all sorts of people. you know, and in fact, I'll tell you just, do we have time? I'll tell you a fun story.
Yeah, go
fun story, Rafi, is because I never tell students where they're going to go. So come and join me in central London, because I found it so much easier to do this in central London.
Yeah.
So I have students coming down from, you know, Carlisle through to Plymouth, you know, so meet in central London from, you know, just a dozen. And we'll go off. And I remember to tell one group, right, we're going to go off and see a guy called Charlie Mullins. He's a plumber. And they went, oh. A couple of teachers there were going, plumber? What? I said, yeah, he left school with hardly no qualifications at all. And he became a plumber. We're going to go and see what he's done. And Charlie Mullins set up a company called Pimlico Plumbers. You know, it's got a turnover of just under 100 million quid a year, employs 500 people. And, you know, he's not a plumber. Well, he is, but he's a businessman. He's got his OBE. And when you meet him, he says, you know, it doesn't really matter what it is. When you start working, everything's going to change anyway. And the question is, just start doing stuff for money. Because as soon as you do that, you then start learning much, 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 much more. Anyway, when you go and see 4 or 5 people on the same day, something happens. And what happens is, gosh, right, there's a hell of a lot more than just the qualification. There's whoa, crikey. And amazingly, so the program I've got is 4 days. That's all it is. It's just 4 days spread over a few months. And what happens is that people realize, okay, it's these other things which are much more important. And funnily enough, when they do that, they will do better at their exams, which you'd thought that's a nonsense, because there's a purpose to it.
Yeah.
There's a purpose. Does that's a terribly bad answer, Rafi, to what was a simple question.
Not at all. I mean, I'm just loving this insight. And what I really want to touch upon to Marcus is, and this is something I'm quite passionate about as well, Bryqanston Square. I've seen your website. I've seen the great work you do. And I think there's so many, and I know that from your story, your difficult background, I did come across and read that you're passionate to work with disillusioned young people. And I definitely think I was one of them. When I was in school, I didn't believe in myself much. And I wasn't put forward to the head boy. I wasn't put forward to any of these roles. And that's fine. But I just wish that maybe more people would have believed in me. And for my apprenticeship, I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for a very low level apprenticeship. Nothing wrong with that. I just didn't have the belief that, wait a minute, I can actually be in BT and do a degree apprenticeship, which I'm very thankful for that I'm now in. And I want to know, what is Bryqanston Square doing for our young people who maybe don't believe in themselves, who have a lack of self-esteem, who maybe come from difficult backgrounds, and just helping them to pivot and just turn that around?
Well, I suppose that's where our focus is. And we've so far reached indirectly, directly 100,000. Wow. And really intensely, 6,000-7,000 now. And, you know, so I get called in by a school, usually, who says, I've got this group of kids and they're really difficult. You know, year 10s aren't, terrible year 10s or terrible year 11s. So I go, all of them? No, there's just a bunch of bastards in there. Yeah, they don't, not quite like that. And what I say is, look, I'll take a dozen students, because you can't get more than a dozen round a boardroom, you know.
Yeah.
And I say, there are students in your school who are the influencers. You know, they're the influencers, and I'll tell you how to choose them. There'll be some students who are super, super bright and bored as hell, and they're usually disruptive.
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, then there's another group of students who haven't got it at all, and they're disruptive. So they're both disruptive, but for very different reasons. And then there's another group who just do time. They don't do anything particularly well. They don't do anything particularly badly.
Yeah.
They're just there. And if you get all of them together, and there'll also be some who've got so much stuff going on outside school, the school is totally irrelevant. Parents just got divorced, dad died, mum died, they've just been made homeless and all the rest of it. And they might fit into each of those three categories, but they've got this big thing over them.
Yeah.
And if you have a group which has got all of them together, so they can't work out, are we the bad kids? Or, oh, we're the gifted and talented ones. We're super, just all of them, and go off on this journey. Then what happens is that people get it and it permeates through the whole school, and it sort of sets up this positive virus.
Yeah.
So the reason why you might have, if you go back in time and you go, well, why did you feel like that? Well, it might have happened on almost in the first week, So remember, a lot of students, when they end up in the school, they don't choose which teachers, and the teachers don't choose which students. It's a sort of randomization. And in your first day, there might be a teacher there, and you just say something, and that teacher goes, "Oh, right, Rafi's a bit of a troublemaker." Or equally well, you might have a decision, Rafi, that teacher smells. Don't like that teacher. Or have you noticed sometimes you get this instant bonding or instant potential friction or whatever it is, and then forever you're sort of thinking like that. Another time, you might have asked a question and somebody goes, Rafi, did you really not understand? I mean, really? Hey, class, did I do something wrong, or is Rafi just a bit dull? At which you're going to go, right, I'm not going to,
Just put off,
and that can stay quite a long time, and it can really stay a long time. And it's these inconsequential things which can affect you, and then you become apparently disillusioned. You might become disillusioned. It's really funny. Sometimes I run stuff for staff in schools.
Yeah.
A lot of staff at the moment are talking about behavior management. And I go, you know what? Don't call it behavior management. Call it, how do I make my lessons less shitty? Because if your lesson's rubbish, why would somebody bother to pay attention? If they think you're a complete twonk, they're not going to respect anything which you say. And let's just understand, we all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that. We all go to, so I don't know, Rafi, have you ever been to a training session at BT? And, it's not that good. To your friend.
No comment.
I mean, it can happen. And actually what takes place is all this little bit goes into your kit bag, and then you decide, I'm not going to stand for head boy. For the election, I'm not going to stand for a head boy because I don't want to get singled out. And actually, I can't be bothered to play the system. Might happen, So the reality is, look at you, Rafi. You're hugely successful, and so when you go back and you look at you some years ago, and say, well, how come the school didn't recognise Rafi, who is going to be leaving this school? How come they never recognised that? And that, Rafi, is a fault of the school, not a fault of you.
Interesting. Wow. And it's really good to hear that Bryqanston is leading the way in changing these perspectives and helping these, people who feel disillusioned, our young people, and taking them forward. So great to hear about all that work.
Well, sorry, Rafi, the best group I've ever worked with are a group of kids from Nottingham who've been thrown out of their schools. So they're all in effectively a pupil referral unit.
Right.
And they're all looked after. So they don't have a stable family background. They've been put into care. They've been thrown out of school. And those students, wow, talk about savvy and grit and determination. Wow. I'd rather work with them day in, day out than work with a bunch of kids who are gifted and talented, because the one thing about gifted and talented is you never lose it. It's never, Rafi, you were gifted and talented. Now you're just rubbish. Downgraded and upgraded. So you start thinking, what is this rubbish?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for that insight, Marcus. I now want to move on to a topic where we also discussed previously, and it's about the digital world that we live in. And I think there's so much statistics out there telling us about the youth unemployment and graduate unemployment. Now, all of that is true, but I think your perspective is so refreshing. And I think our audience would love to hear this, which is how can we pivot in the digital world? How can we grab opportunities from our screens where 2/3 of us are ultimately in this world and we can do whatever we want really, because, you know, we're just in this new digital world. And one of my friends, Marcus, he was going to apply for a graduate scheme in cybersecurity, got his master's and everything. But then he saw that the job market wasn't picking up. And what I really admire about him is that he said, okay, I'm going to pivot. And he set up his own organization, a cybersecurity consultancy, and he's doing really well. So that's a great example of what one of, you know, my friends are doing. And I'd love our audience to know, how can we pivot in today's digital world? How can our young people ultimately get a rung up the ladder in today's new reality?
Well, the first thing is I don't think there's a ladder.
Okay.
A ladder implies a sort of sequence, you know, with a top and a bottom. And I don't think it is that. I think it's sideways, upwards, downwards. It's non-traditional anymore.
Uh-huh.
So the fact that so if you want to set up a company in the UK, to have a limited company, it costs £2. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's not a barrier. The thing is, if you've got a skill, somebody in the 7.5 billion people in the world would like a bit of access to that skill. Trouble is, we don't know who or when.
Yeah.
And what the traditional model has been is to have a bunch of employees in a company who are making money for the company rather than for themselves.
Yeah.
Once the individual realizes that they're actually creating value, then the question is, how can they access that value themselves? And when one starts looking at that, you say, do I need to effectively put myself to somebody as a resource for them to exploit? And exploitation might be the wrong word. But Rafi, you know, the money which BT makes from your services is much more than your salary. Otherwise, you know, you would have negative value, wouldn't you? And so the question is, how can you access some of that yourself? So it's nicer having a job at, and don't get me wrong, so I'm going to go somewhere else. So it's nicer to have somebody taking care of the fact that you're getting paid, so you don't have to worry about that. And they're worried about how do they make the maximum money out of you. When you start shifting and you say, well, actually, maybe I can do that myself. That's Coldplay launching without going through a label. That's artists putting their work up on YouTube rather than going through a record label. And so as they get on to get known and get lots of followings, you know, they can start getting a different revenue stream out of effectively the watch lists, and from YouTube you can get paid. It's how you can make money out of playing Fortnite. It's all this sort of stuff. You know, why is it that some people are spending all their money going to football matches to watch people enjoying themselves? What? You know, why is that? And so let's go back. So today's world is slightly different from the world of 2 years ago. And primarily because so many people are on screens.
Yeah.
So we've moved away from geographical boundaries into time zone boundaries. So there used to be, you know, Rafi, if you wanted to talk to somebody at, I don't know, let's try and, at 10 cent, you know, you would fly over there and adjust the time zone through jet lag. Now you can click and you can talk to somebody at 10 cent, but they might want to talk to you at 4 o'clock in your morning, which is their afternoon. And so it's time zones. So people are all on screens, people are on screens, but they're in different time zones. And so we've moved from the geographical boundaries into time zone boundaries. And there's also something about how do we access those people? How do I know they exist? Well, they're all one click away. And so that becomes the power of your own network and how much people know you exist and how much you are also seeking people out. And there's lots of tools for that. There's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably what I use the most, but I suppose there's also Facebook and there's a bit of WhatsApp, and TikTok is there are a lot of people making a hell of a lot of money out of TikTok. And in a lot of cases, this is sort of what you might consider to be unconventional. You know, we have got already virtual internships. So there are people who are doing internships, paid internships, without ever going to the company. There are a huge number of people doing all sorts of things for money without actually having to get out of their home and travel somewhere to an employer to sit in their office to do that. So to pivot effectively, there's a few things. First of all, one might even have to say, so I have value and I need to move away from asking somebody else to effectively underwrite my value by employing me. And so I'm going to set up my own company, like your friend, and sell myself out there. Now, a lot of people go, oh my goodness, how the hell do I do that? And so the real thing is to get your first client. The first time somebody actually pays you to do something. I mean, I'll tell you now, there was a guy I met who I thought was really great. How old was he at the time? About 19. And I said, I'd like you to come and talk about your experience to a bunch of school teachers. He said, what? He said, oh, just I'm doing a session for a bunch of school teachers. It'd be good for you to come along. And I said, I'll pay you. And he said, how much? I said, I'll pay you. Yeah, I'll pay you quite well. And he said, well, how much? I said, I'll pay you 100 quid a minute. And he said, what?
Wow.
Well, I only want to talk. I want you to talk for 5 minutes.
Not bad.
Not bad. But when you think, then you've got to get on a train and travel there and all the rest of it. It took them a whole day. But the point about it is that actually you can make an income for yourself, from the skill set which you've got. But you may have to pivot. So what have I had to do? So I'm doing quite a lot of stuff remotely. And my goodness, we couldn't do this sort of thing. People get so bored if this is the only way you do it. So I might have to learn some techniques. I mean, as an example, I'm talking to you here, but actually I'm here. This is me. So I've had to work out how to make all this stuff work. And I've got 3 screens, but they're the old screens, because if you put 3 wide screens together, you'll never get from one side to the other. You'll be too wide. And I've had to learn all this stuff in a couple of months. There's no sort of like training program for it. And so all this stuff is evolving all the time. And that is the great thing about it, because it's all free. There's so much free stuff out there. So much free stuff. There are There's 183 universities in this country. There's 1,200 major universities around the world. Almost all of them have got MOOCs, massive open online courses. You can just sign up for one. Half of them are free. So there's no reason why we can't access stuff. There's no reason why we can't start making friends in other countries, get the time zone right, and then say, hey, look, I'm here in the UK. I speak pretty good English. I know you're in China, and I know you'd love to learn English. So why don't we just set up a few sessions? I tell you what, 20 euros an hour, or 200 euros, and I'll get there. 20 quid doesn't really matter. It's just saying it and then having the conversation. Why not? If you go and have a look at some of the stuff which is published on Amazon, if you just go onto Amazon, you look at some of the descriptions of some of the products, you go, that's rubbish. So just say, look, I can translate that better for you. I can make that into better English. How much would that be? I'll be 10 quid. And then you got 25 clients suddenly, and then you can say, well, that's what I do. I translate instruction books. I translate these sorts of things. I do this, and that today is open to everybody. Whereas a couple of years ago, if you started talking about virtual internships and doing stuff online, and I can help you work out how to be better at Zoom. I can give you a hand in just how to use Zoom and how to put up virtual backgrounds.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot of people got no idea how to do that. So they will pay for it.
Yeah.
So one thing has closed down a little bit, and at the same time, masses of things have opened. And I think when we spoke yesterday, I was sort of, there are 6 million businesses in the UK. 6 million. I mean, come on. It's not like the world has closed down. The world, absolutely not. And some people are doing fantastically well fantastically well. And some people are sort of going, oh, life is over. There are no jobs. There might not be jobs, but there are a hell of a lot of opportunities. And the question is, how do you just make the opportunity pay?
Yeah,
that's it. How do you make the opportunity pay? Rafi, we should probably have a session for people if they want to work out how to get my skill set on online paid for, and we can run. If you're up for it, we can run a couple of sessions, Rafi. Why not,
Marcus? Yeah, I'd love that. I mean, I'm loving the way you're saying that you're choosing hope, you're choosing positivity, you're choosing instead of kind of the negative stuff. So I don't know who wouldn't be drawn to that and to learn more about that. So yeah, I'm up for it. And thank you for all that brilliant insight. I want to move on to a topic about personal branding and profiling. So if we look at a LinkedIn profile, let's say, which I know you said that you use LinkedIn, what makes a good LinkedIn profile? Because I read a statistic that 80% of jobs are actually not when you go on the website, but it's actually through the people you know. So what's a good LinkedIn profile, and how can we make the best use of it as young people in order to widen our career and opportunity?
Oh, well, I wish I knew the answer to that. And Rafi, if you want that, it'll cost you a bit. Sorry. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I think one needs to sort of somehow make it work that you come out, you shine, and understand who you are. Hang on, I'm just looking up LinkedIn. I'm going to try and get my profile up because I think mine is a bit rubbish. And it will be rubbish because I do use it. But so hang on, I'll put mine up and we'll see if that makes.
Yeah, that should be great. So everyone connect with Marcus, yeah.
So mine is conference, virtual and physical host and speaker on innovation, education, school design, meets many people, shares ideas, blah blah blah. And I've changed this a number of times. I probably every couple of months I go, that's not quite right. No, lots of picture and all the rest of it. But the real thing which happens is when you just look at how many people are saying nice things about you, and it's probably how many people are saying nice things about you and what's going on in your. So I'll go back to just me talking. It is what makes the profile come to life. It's a little bit like when you go on to looking at anything, it's having a look at the reviews. And sometimes the reviews are more important than what the person says or what the organization is saying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I find it fascinating, for example, that schools don't have all the teacher profiles so that you know who the teachers are and what their backgrounds are. I mean, I find that extraordinary. But taking that away, it is networking. And it's who you trust. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing each of us have ended up where we are because of some random encounters with people. And those random encounters can do a couple of things. So I think I was saying to you, Rafi, yesterday that at school, my school was, because I was disadvantaged and all the rest of it, and so I'm sure the school would have thought, oh yeah, we're going to get him to Oxbridge, because then, it'll show how good we are. And my school kept on saying to me, you should go to Oxbridge. And I looked, I couldn't find Oxbridge on the map, which is why I went to Bristol. I couldn't find it on the map. And actually, I was too embarrassed to say, excuse me, I can't find Oxbridge on the map. I can't find it.
Yeah,
it doesn't bloody exist, So I was one of those. Now, so that encounter was probably a negative one, because nobody said, hey, look, Marcus, there's Oxford University and Cambridge University, and between them they got called.
Yeah.
If I hadn't met Tony, I wouldn't have raced cars at uni. And that wouldn't have driven me into wanting to build cars, which wouldn't have which wouldn't have got me talking at the bank about borrowing money, which wouldn't have put me on this bit of a career. But at the same time, when I was at school, I was working at a shop, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And I was working at a shop, which was, I think it was called a drugstore. We sold everything from prescription medicine through to very high-end cameras, through to perfume and cosmetics. Nice. And it was in central London. And it was the perfume, cosmetics, and the gifts, and the cameras, and the audio equipment which made the money. But the pharmacy at the rear of the store meant we could be open very long hours. And the pharmacy at the very end of the store, that people want to get their prescriptions, so they have to walk past everything else.
Yeah.
And I discovered very quickly, I loved talking to people and selling things. I loved it. To the extent that I spoke, and I became promoted quite fast because I was quite good. And so at the age of 18, I was the assistant manager, which is ludicrous. I was still at school, for heaven's sake.
Gosh.
And I remember saying to the human resources director, I think I don't want to go to university. I want to work here. And he said, Marcus, are you insane? Go to university. You can always work here at the weekends. Go to university. It'll change your life totally. And I think if he hadn't said that, I might have ended up in retail. It's just these moments. But those moments only happen when you actually say things to people. And, it was me saying, I think I want to work here and not go to university. If I hadn't done that, if I just made the decision on my own, God, that would have been a mistake. And so, he's still in my network, Andy McAleenan, and he's still in my network. And that's the sort of thing. And I'm guessing with you, Rafi, the reason why you've ended up at BT is because of some chance conversations, and you don't realize what they're doing. And they completely change our directions.
Mm.
So the more people one can talk to, but not idiots, there are a lot of people who one meets who just bullshit, I think the best way of describing this is there are some people who as true, and they're there for you. And there are other people who are just there to use you.
Yeah.
So when things are going well, they're with you. Yeah. As soon as they go wrong, they're gone. So I won't take advice from people who are, yeah. It goes wrong, they're gone. No, I want to trust people. And when you have trust, then you have a network, and then things can be fantastic. And that's it, really. And so the more people you meet, the more you can start building a group of people around you who can just enrich your experience. And, Rafi, we've met a bit, all right? But you seem a really good guy. And so from this conversation, I had no hesitation, in saying to Lars, who's in Sweden, that actually, if you want to get a little bit of advice on cybersecurity, talk to Rafi. I'd have no hesitation at all, because I know you're not going to let me down, with Lars thinking, oh, Marcus, what the hell did you introduce me to Rafi for? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's called a network.
Wow.
And
I really like that. Mm-hmm.
I think I spoke to you before and said, would you like to be working with Nokia in Dubai? Because, you know, Dubai is setting up Tech City. They're putting 20 billion quid into it. So, you know, I mean, it's coming out of the ground. I mean, this is everything. So, you know, it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you want to work in the Greater Bay Area, you know, in Hsinchu. I mean, it's 85 million people. You know, the Bay Area of San Francisco has only got 5 million. This has got 85 million people in it. You know, so the number of opportunities when you've got 85 million are a hell of a lot more. And if you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley, everybody's moving to Austin, Texas anyway. You know, because Silicon Valley is too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And Austin, Texas is becoming the cool place. So go to Austin.
Yeah.
And there's nothing stopping it. Well, okay, so at the moment we have a pandemic, but you can still communicate with people. I don't know. I'm probably gabbling on, Raf, and you've been awfully polite and haven't said, oh, Marcus, for heaven's sake, shut up.
No, not at all. I mean, I think, Marcus, what you're saying is, you know, at the end of the day, there's no tricks, there's no shortcuts. It's just communicate and get to know as many people as you can and build up that network. And just as we end off, I want to hone into presenting. So I looked on your LinkedIn. I saw that you've done a whole lot of TED Talks. You even get young people and you get them to criticize and critique and, you know, get them involved in the whole TED Talk process. I want to ask you two things. So number one, what, you know, because everything's on Zoom right now, we have to present ourselves a bit what we're doing now. We, you know, when we're speaking to a company or if we've got our own business, we've got to speak to clients. How can we do that effectively? And the second question that I want to end off with is there any experience that you had that was a great learning lesson for you? Was there a talk maybe that you gave and you were like, oh gosh, wow, I've learned such a big lesson from giving that talk? So what insight can you give us on the presenting space?
Well, the first thing is experience. So the more you do, the more you learn. And you generally learn the most from when things go horribly wrong. Yeah. I mean, horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the first time you try to share your screen and everything's gone. You go, what the hell happened there? You know, the first time you find yourself minimizing the wrong things or just exiting the whole thing and you actually press quit, you know, and those are the great things. I host quite a lot of TEDx conferences. I try to host one every 2 months somewhere in the world.
Wow.
And as a host, you know, the guy on the stage who's introducing the speakers. And so I have a way of doing it. In fact, you can see I've recorded, I've got quite a lot of stuff out there. So you can see the TED Talk, but you can also see what I do around the edges. So I interview people. That doesn't get posted on the TED Talk, but my interview I just post anyway. And what I love is when things go wrong, because when things go wrong is when I can add value.
Love that.
You know, the speaker comes on the stage and the tech's not working. So I can come on and I say, hey, look, I'm sorry, the tech's not working. There was a really great looper. There was a girl in Vilnius who's one of the most successful loopers, you know, so she's a bit like Ed Sheeran. So she creates a bit and loops, and then it builds. And she was really in the zone. And what had happened is that we weren't hearing anything online, you know, so I had to go up to her and put my hand on her shoulder and stop her and then say, look, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to start all over again and get her off the stage, you know, get the audience prepared again, and then comes back on. It's Ray, and she's back on, and then she gets in the zone, because it can kill people when things go wrong. Yeah. You know, and I bet you've seen that when people go, oh no, it's gone wrong, and they start freezing, they go, oh, you know. And it's the same. So, you know, we're on this. Now, I don't know. I'm sitting, you know, sometimes I'm standing, but I'm sitting and I'm trying to be a reasonably animated, you know, and I'm sort of saying, hey, look, you know, let's go and have a look at this. And then, oh no, that's the wrong one. You know, it isn't the right. I did that on purpose, but okay, that's the wrong. I didn't mean to show that screen. And actually it's the way in which one deals with it. Yeah. They keep on going and make a bit of fun. Now me, I'd like to think that people think I'm sort of a little bit funnish. That's not hardy, hardy, ha, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I try to speak using simple language rather than complicated language. And I think if one presents to let you shine out, then that's probably better than say, good afternoon, Rafi. So my name is Marcus Orlovsky. I'm the CEO of Bryqanston Square. We work with young people, especially disadvantaged young people around the world. And one of the things which we really pride ourselves on is having a magnificent interface between students and technology and their parents and the schools. And one of the things which God's sake, you can listen to that. And, it is a bit about movement and, going backwards and forwards and what have you got in the background. So I deliberately don't have, I've got a motorcycle in the background, because I quite enjoy it. And if people want to say, what the hell's that bike doing? We can have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, putting up some sort of screen and hiding myself. Yeah. So I'll let me come out. And I think in Zoom, because we don't get the chance. So you don't know. Look, you don't know if this it smells or not. We just assume it doesn't. Actually, it doesn't. It's okay. But when you meet somebody, all these other things come in to play. And on a screen, we don't have any of it. All we have is the voice and the two-dimensional images of what's going on. So, I will go and say, look, come on, I'm actually here, and my goodness, that is a real shift when you see actually who you're talking to. It's a real shift because when we're just like this, we don't, so I'm quite happy to show people and let people into that sort of secret. And I'm quite happy to say, look, I don't quite know how this stuff works. Let's give it a go. Or that doesn't happen. And the more the people are prepared to show themselves in this environment, the better. Because everybody knows this is new.
Yeah.
We haven't really done this before. Okay.
Sure.
So professional preventers have. When I watch television and I watch the news program and you see somebody talking, to me, but they've got nobody else around. All the cameras are robotically moving around. I'm thinking, how the hell do they do that? So I don't know if this is coming across. I just try to be a little bit more, semi-animate. Look, I haven't even had a haircut, for heaven's sake. So the more you can allow yourself to come through, the better, because we're all in the same boat. So that's what I suggest. Did that go anywhere close to answering your question?
It definitely did. I think with all the points you're saying, it's about being authentic. If you're meeting someone for the first time, don't just have that corporate office thing behind you. Show them a bit and show them something that maybe shows your personality off. And I have to say, Marcus, as part of my sales training at BT, one of the tips I was given by one of my colleagues was just that. It was if you've got a good painting or something, one of your hobbies that you could show in the background, show it off, and that can start the conversation going. So that makes a lot of sense. Marcus, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to unpick your brain, and I think we've touched upon such great conversations and topics that I'm sure will be super valuable for young people. I want to thank you for your time and for everyone joining in. If you're listening now or listening later, I hope you enjoy this. And thank you to Generation Success and to Marcus. Thank you. It's been great having this session with you.
Well, I've enjoyed it. That's
good.
Good to do these things. So thank you, Rafi, for letting me happen. And thank you, Generation Success, for putting these sorts of things together. I think we need more of them.
Amazing.
More.
Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye.